Please.
Ajena gati.
All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I thought it was important to take this opportunity to ensure that there is no misunderstanding of U.S. concerns about the enforcement of the regulation of the Central Bank of Kosovo. Assistant Secretary Jim O'Brien, who is the senior most official in the Department of State for Europe, spoke directly to this on the record earlier this week. His message was quite clear. My message has been clear. Our ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has also been quite clear. I'm going to restate it. The United States has very significant concerns with the manner in which this regulation is being enforced. We've raised these concerns in public, and we've raised these concerns in private. We do not challenge the need for Kosovo to regulate its financial sector, nor do we challenge the need for Kosovo to take actions to reduce the risk of financial crimes, including money laundering and terrorist financing. We do not challenge the Constitution of Kosovo or the authorities of the central bank. But we have repeatedly asked the government of Kosovo to postpone enforcement of this regulation as greater preparatory work is needed, particularly with regard to the effect of the enforcement of this regulation on vulnerable members of minority communities. We've specifically asked for two things. One, there needs to be a procedure in place for Serbia to transfer funds consistent with the central bank regulation, but that meets European standards and practices of good governance. Establishment of that procedure needs to be discussed in the context of the EU facilitated dialogue. We look to both Kosovo and Serbia to engage constructively on this. Two, while the work is done to establish this long-term process, there needs to be interim provisions in place that allow Serbia to continue to provide funding for needed social services. This includes social benefit payments like pensions and payments to single parents, support for the healthcare and educational systems. Thus far, there has been no identification or effort to make this happen on an interim basis. I regret that I have to call attention to the very clear and stark tone of Assistant Secretary O'Brien's interview on this topic this week. He asked for partnership with the government of Kosovo on this issue. He expressed regret that the Kurti government has not been responsive to our requests. And he made clear that if Prime Minister Kurti, quote, won't treat us as a partner, it calls into question how much of a partner we can regard this government as being, unquote. I'm concerned that there are public statements now following his interview that suggest that the U.S.-Kosovo partnership has not been affected and may not be affected by this situation. I have to be clear, that is simply not true. That is simply not the case. As Assistant Secretary O'Brien stated, this situation has already affected the quality of our partnership between our two governments. Any suggestion to the contrary reflects a fundamental misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of the importance we place on resolving this issue in a manner that is responsive to our concerns, and more importantly, done in a manner that ensures continued support to the vulnerable people from Kosovo's minority communities. With that, I'm happy to take a few questions.
Mr. Ambassador, what do you think about the Kosovo government's people who are saying that they are not going to deal this issue of dinar into the EU facilitated dialogue?
I understand some people are saying that. That misrepresents the situation as far as we're concerned and misunderstands it. If this is going to work, Serbia needs to also be on board with how it works. The mechanism to have this conversation is the EU facilitated dialogue. We've said that, the European Union said that, a number of members in the Security Council said that just last week. So I can understand why some people wish it were otherwise, but I am telling you the way it is and what our expectations are.
Are you hoping for a postponement or any kind of a deal from the Kosovo government?
Well, my government's been clear. We have asked for a postponement in enforcement. That continues to be our position. So yes, I am hoping for the government to take our advice on board and rather than simply saying they are talking to us about it, actually act in accordance with what we're requesting. That is our expectation. That is our expectation for partnership.
Mr. Ambassador, a do të ketë masa për Severinë e Kosovës? A pritet ka zërat që ka masa?
Consequences for the government of Kosovo.
So I believe,
measures.
yeah, I believe the question had to do with consequences or potential measures. This keeps being asked a lot too. I mean, it was asked yesterday at the State Department briefing, and the spokesman of the State Department said that he was not in a position to talk about specific measures, and that is all I can add. But I will say again, as Jim O'Brien has said, we would hope that the government of Prime Minister Kurti would engage, as partners do, in resolving this issue together, rather than taking action unilaterally and directly at variance with what we've asked to do. We are concerned, I will even say frustrated, that the government of Prime Minister Kurti has not done that. And any suggestion that things are okay and that quietly we're all on board with each other is simply not true. We are concerned and we are frustrated, and I think the tone from Assistant Secretary O'Brien's interview reflects that very, very clearly.
Mr. Ambassador, in which ways this decision of the government or this relation with the U.S. have affected or made a difference with the partnership between Kosovo government and U.S.?
Well, I'll give you a few examples. It is very rare in the Security Council of the United Nations for the American representative of the Security Council to say critical things about a government of Kosovo. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield did. It is very rare for the Assistant Secretary of the United States for Europe, Jim O'Brien now, but to remind you how important that job is, when we were negotiating the Dayton Accords, the job that Ambassador Holbrooke held at that time was Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. So Jim O'Brien holds now the job that Dick Holbrooke held in the mid-90s doing Dayton. So for that individual, Gabe Escobar's boss, my boss, to give an interview with the tone and content that he gave, that's very rare. And so I think that already reflects a problem. And our hope is to stop this. We don't want to be in this circumstance. We want to be in a different circumstance. The United States' commitment to the people of Kosovo is as strong as it's ever been. As we look to celebrate on Saturday the anniversary of Kosovo's Declaration of Independence, I look forward to being present to celebrate what has been achieved together. But it will just serve to underscore, to some extent, how troublesome this moment is, that our governments do not seem to be working in partnership with one another. So I want to avoid more things like that.
How this is going to affect Kosovo's path to integration?
So the question was, how would this affect Kosovo's path to integration? It's hard for me to answer, other than I would say that this is not just a request from the United States. All of the countries that Kosovo relies on to advance its path to the European Union, to NATO, to the Council of Europe, to other institutions, have all expressed real, clear concerns. It seems unwise for the government to simply not respond to those concerns, and I have to say that is our impression of what's happening right now. With that, thank you all very much.
Thank you.